Recently, we just looked at subsistence agricultural practices, and we did a brief introduction or comparison to commercial and agricultural subsistence agriculture. Today, we're going to look specifically at the various types of commercial agriculture. As you see here, the terms and concepts you should be able to identify and explain are listed below. Right now, we're going to focus primarily on the agricultural practices and the different types. And there are 6 major ones, and then we have to also look at the concept of aquaculture, or essentially fish farming. So commercial agriculture, as we noticed, is going to happen in the wealthier countries around the world. We've highlighted this before as being part of the mostly MDCs. And again, commercial agriculture highlights the idea that it is crop production is produced primarily for profit, that most of what's produced is going to be sold off of these agricultural farms. So the 6 major types: mixed crop and livestock, dairy farming, grain farming, livestock ranching, commercial gardening and fruit farming, and then Mediterranean agriculture. All these, again, are going to be largely influenced by physical features and the landscape and the natural environment that we find in a particular region. So, quickly highlighting the different types, as these 6 different types and kind of the major characteristics. First of all, mixed crop and livestock. This is where we're seeing an integration or the combination of both the production of a cereal grain, most often corn, the most commonly farmed cereal grain in the world, but most of the corn we produce is actually produced for animal stock or livestock as feed. So in this case, even though there's a lot of corn being grown, it's not being sold, but it's part of the production process and fattening the livestock, which then are sold commercially. This is going to be, in being able to do this successfully, farmers are going to use crop rotation, or basically try to sustainably use their land so they don't exhaust the fertility of the soil. So there's usually, certain fields are left to fallow and to preserve and to replenish the sustainability of the land. So if you look around the world, you see a lot of corn in production in the United States. Again, not primarily because we eat so much corn, but because it's used for livestock. And you'll see that this loosely correlates to, again, the MDCs, where we see greater production. Dairy farming is then now not for the production of livestock for slaughter, but for the resources or the dairy products that we consume daily in most of our lives. And the key part of this, and going back to the history of dairy farming, is that dairy farming had to be near urban areas because of the spoilage factor. And that's still to some extent a concern, but nowhere near what it was in the early 1900s or pre-refrigeration, whether it's locally or in refrigerated trucks or the transportation and preservation of dairy products. And so there's actually something called a milk shed, which is the ring or the sort of the maximum distance these dairy farms would be located outside an urban area to prevent spoilage of these products. And again, if we look at milk production, you'll notice again it's loosely correlated to the more wealthy regions of the world. If we look at this change, though, we're seeing a leveling factor of dairy production in developed worlds. It's increasing in the developing world. Grain farming is the next example. We're looking at this. Generally speaking, it's going to be drier, more seasonal regions. But wheat is important because it is the primary crop because it doesn't spoil. It can be consumed, or it can be saved and stored for many, many years. And this is where humans use this for because of its high calorie value, and it's in many of the things we consume today. And again, we can see this. You might want to take a pause to moment to identify these areas where we see grain farming. The next one we're going to look at is livestock ranching. This is generally going to be found in areas where land is less productive, and this can also include other animal farms, not just most people think of cattle. But this is over semi-arid or arid land where it's not suitable for intense agricultural purposes, and where the livestock can be free to roam and there's some movement there. We're seeing some consolidated practices now as we start to see more and more intense commercial practices, and we see this in various aspects of the meat industry or livestock industry, where we're seeing these ranches consolidated into a smaller space and a more systematic or processed way of fattening up the cattle or livestock for market. The next one we're looking at, or last one, is commercial gardening and fruit farming. This is predominantly in the southeast because of the climate and the humid area, but it's also known as truck farming because it's generally going to be produced and brought into urban areas for sale because of the high perishability of fruit and gardening products. This could also include fresh flowers and similar types of products. Last one we're looking at is Mediterranean agriculture. We're going to see this as being strongly tied to the climate regions, correlated to the Mediterranean region. And we're seeing this as specific. These crops are very sensitive to the climate they grow in. There's very few places in the world that have similar climates, just like the Mediterranean region. One place in the United States in particular is in Southern California, in parts of Southern Africa.